Today's guest is a best-selling author on the subject of OBEs, or out-of-body experiences. He's also a paranormal researcher and a former aeronautical engineer who worked on projects such as the International Space Station, amongst many others. Please give a big Koit welcome to Dr. Albert Taylor. KoitCast! Hi Albert, welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here.
Excellent stuff. Thank you for coming. So let's start with a basic brief bio about you. Can you just run in a little bit about your history?
Sure, sure. Um, from a little child, I've always loved things that would have defied gravity. So I couldn't wait, and straight out of high school, I joined the United States Air Force, and I became a crew chief on the Lockheed U-2, which is known as Dragon Lady to most. I got a secret clearance then. Kept going to school on the GI Bill. Got out of the military, and I immediately went to work for Lockheed Skunk Works on the stealth fighter because of my experience on the Dragon Lady. And I mean, and that was just unbelievable at the time because no one even knew it existed. Continued to go to school, got my doctorate in aeronautical engineering. And then I went over to the B-1 bomber program and I worked on the flight controls, hydraulic systems, and things like that. And the rotary launch system for missiles. Um, I started, I really was interested in space, and
Hmm.
I've always wanted to be in space program. So the closest I got at that particular time is I got offered a job on President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, which is a satellite program, anti-ballistic missile program. And I also, during that time, I was also working on GPS and helping to develop GPS. And now everybody has GPS.
Mm.
First, we did it for the military, 25 satellites, constellations, and then now everybody uses it. And then I started having an increase in spiritual experiences, which I didn't understand, which began to gradually change my whole perspective on life and myself and my career. So I could no longer work on Department of Defense programs. So I got offered a position on the International Space Station. And of course, I didn't turn it down. And I started doing development work on the cupola, which is the windows that everybody looks out of, the command and control node, which plugs in all the different modules, habitation module, airlock, that type of thing. And the spiritual experiences continued on. They went from once every 2 weeks or so to once a week, and then it went to 3 times a night. And working on the space station and having some bizarre experiences happen to me, it was very puzzling. So the only thing I could think of, being an engineer scientist at the time, is to go to the doctor and see if I could get some type of analysis or something on what was wrong with me, because that's how the way I figured it. And I went to a psychologist first, and got a clean bill of health, which was surprising. And physical and all of that. And everybody gave me a clean bill of health, but I was having these bizarre spiritual experiences almost every night and 3 times a night. And I mean, to me, it was terrifying only because it was the unknown and I didn't know what it was. And I decided that I was going to do an experiment on myself. Um, because I'm a researcher, I set up a period of 10 days to do these experiments. And because it was just happening without me trying to at the time, I didn't know how to make it happen. I just went with the flow. And the first few nights of that particular experience, I would have to say was the beginning of something that changed my life forever. So I left aerospace because I started keeping a diary, which is during that 10-day period of time. I started keeping a very detailed diary of what was happening to me. After I finished the diary, I mean, it grew and grew and grew. And I decided that maybe there's other people out there who are having these type of experiences. So I have to figure out a way of sharing the diary, what I've discovered with them. And so I started reading up on self-publishing and things like that. And I decided to self-publish my first book, which was Soul Traveler. And I had no idea that that book was going to be eventually go to number one Times bestseller. And there were going to be people from all over the world writing me, talking about sharing similar experiences because, you know, all my life I've had these experiences happen since I was age 5. And we haven't gone into detail, but I will
Yeah,
gladly.
sure.
But because of the superstitions in my family is from the deep South, very religious. And because of the superstitions that they would respond with when I started, complaining about being paralyzed at night, hearing someone call my name, that type of thing, my grandmother and my mother would say, the witches are riding you because you were bad that night. Which now go back to bed, which was
Yeah, stop.
which was great. And I was terrified. I was 5 years old, and they're saying I'm being bad, but I had no idea. So I think it felt, all this time later, it felt like I was sleeping with the covers wrapped around my head with just my nose poking out so I could breathe because I was so scared. And that particular experience, I didn't know was connected to other strange things that was happening to me. Like at that time, I would tell my mother, "Mom, I wake up in my dreams and I fly." I didn't know the term lucid dreaming at the time. I was 5,
Mm.
and she didn't understand, and there was no one who could explain it to me. So I didn't. And then another thing. So we have the night paralysis that I was having. I'm having lucid dreams where I'm flying, and then all of a sudden, one night when I was paralyzed in that paralyzed state, I woke up. I could barely see, and I could see someone standing at the foot of my bed, and they reached out and called my name. And I have to tell you, it terrified me. You know what I mean? I was afraid of ghosts and all that. It's funny that I say that now because I do a lot of paranormal investigation. But I was afraid and terrified, and that stuck with me so much. And that was when my grandmother, started talking about witch rides and all that nonsense. To her, well, to me, it's nonsense.
Yeah, at
To her,
that time, yeah.
yeah, it was a belief. So here it is, years later, when I started having those experiences happen to me, those same experiences happened to me 3 times a night sometime, and including calling my name, someone calling my name. I'm no longer this 5-year-old child. I'm an engineer scientist on the space station. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start documenting it. And that's what the beginning of this was. I had no idea that the documentation and experiments that I was going to be running was going to change my focus on not being a physical being, but being a spiritual being. I had no idea that it was going to, like I said before, become a bestseller. And I had no idea I was going to be sharing that with people all over the world like yourself.
Mm. Now that's a great place to stop. So you've done a shed load of things in your time, and the engineering. I'm keen to get into that first because I think most people will have this experience like yourself, which is to say, they go through life in a standard human way. They're very, very logical. Like you were doing engineering, is you can't say that's wishy-washy. It's pure logical. And then as you get older, you sort of like transition into the spiritualist side of things. So I imagine a lot of people will follow this journey. So let's get straight into the engineering.
Okay.
You worked on a lot of secret programs then.
Yes.
So you mentioned the B-1 bomber. Are you okay to talk about all of this now? Is it all out in the open?
I know how to talk about the stuff. So I've had a lot of practice. So
Yeah.
yeah, the things I can't, we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay, then. So I will be so open-ended with with the question about the B-1 bomber. What did you work on? And could you tell us anything about what you worked on there?
Well, basically, fly, as I mentioned before, flight controls. And I also I did the hydraulic system. I also worked on the landing gear system, which is part of the hydraulic system. And then I worked on the rotary launcher, which is a launcher that fits in the bay of the B-1, and it has like 8 cruise missiles attached to it, and it rotates and drops them out of the bomb bay one at a time.
I see.
So I
Yeah.
worked on the rotary launch system. And it was, I love aircraft. I still do. So it was like I was like a kid in a candy store, even though, it was a weapon of some sort.
Sure.
So, but then I think the most fun, or one of the most interesting jobs I had, was working on the stealth fighter, because that was a classified program too. And just walking in, no one had ever seen this, and walking into the classified area and gazing at the very first one, because I helped to assemble the very first stealth fighter
Whoa, that's
together,
cool.
and it was something I'd never seen. I mean, now all these years later, you see the geometric design of it. We hadn't seen anything like that before, and getting to meet some of my heroes, like the designers on the program, was the one of the biggest thrills in my life. And I just, because I think because of my love for aerospace, I think that made me really good at it.
Yeah, sure.
So
Were you a team leader or you just a member of the team itself?
I wasn't a team leader, and I don't know if we even had leaders, but yeah, I was responsible for a particular part of the design. I would, and the design was fluid, so I would have to make decisions on the spot on whether we were going to change a configuration so that we can install some type of hardware or
Mm.
optical system or something like that.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because both of those things, the B1 and the obviously the stealth fighter, are iconic now, like you say. But back then, I mean, I don't know how you if you can say this or not. How long did we have it before it got released? How long ago were you working on it before it got
I
released?
see. I started working on the stealth fighter in 1977, and we didn't. It was about 10 years later that I heard it announced on the radio that we had the F-117A,
Mm.
and that they actually showed a picture, which I was shocked, because I kept a secret for over a decade. So it took about 10 years.
So when it comes out like that, like in the press, that oh, by the way, here's this new fighter or whatever, does that then give you carte blanche to talk about it, or are you still at that point under an NDA or whatever?
It just depends on what I talk about. I mean, there's still some aspects of it that are classified, so I can't talk about the electronics and how it evades, especially the radar evasion aspect of it. Why is it stealthy? That type of thing. Can't go
Mm.
into that, but I can go into, the, like, it had a single pilot. It wasn't detectable by any type of means that we had at that time. So back in '77, we didn't have a way of tracking it. So we knew that foreign powers and our adversaries didn't have a way of tracking it. So I can talk about that type of thing. Like I said, and I mentioned already about the rotary launcher, but I can't talk about the cruise missiles that the
Sure,
rotary
sure.
launcher, uh, would house. So there are some aspects, but I think the most amazing and most exciting part of the career that I've been blessed to have been given was on the International Space Station. I mean, it's
I
still up
agree with
there
you,
right
by the
now.
way. Yeah, it's an
Yeah, it's
honor.
still up there now, and I got a chance to come up with different types of repair procedures that the astronauts would do on orbit. Some of the things and tools and things and techniques that they are using right now to maintain the station. I developed that, and I wrote those down, and I came up with that. So that I like to look at I went out into the desert, and you can actually see the space station passing over every 90 minutes. That's how fast it's going.
Mm.
And I got to look at it. You can see it's like a little star moving very rapidly across the sky. And just the thought of thinking, hey, there's a piece of me up there
I know
was kind of
that is
that's kind of
amazing.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I imagine it is. I've seen the space station a few times, and yeah, it
mhm.
is because just a little dot, and you think, crikey, there's people up there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. So
random.
that
And
that
they
still
all
brings
looking
me a
through
lot
your
of
thing.
yeah, and that still brings me a lot of pride and
Mm.
happiness in that. And my wife and I, we went to an aerospace museum not too long ago, and there was an astronaut it was a suit hanging from the ceiling, and it had a device on its chest to capture, things like satellites and parts and even parts of the shuttle. And I helped develop that. So I was pointing to it, thinking that's mine up there. I did that. So that's and being I love aerospace. So being having that kind of love for the aerospace, that is the biggest thrill I could ever share with you. I really, it
Yeah.
makes me very happy.
I need to ask you a question about humility and stuff because this crosses my mind a lot, right? Obviously, you did those things, and you can point up and say, "Oh, yeah, I did that," and it's amazing. It's good to be proud of stuff. Do you do you proactively point it out, or do you make sure you keep it so you are humble about it?
I pointed it out to my wife, and I think that that's the only person that I've done that with. Um, Generally, I it's unless I'm asked about it because I could rattle on forever. If you ask me about a particular subject, I will go on and on and on. And I've learned that not everybody's going to be interested in something because I'm excited about it. So I usually am reserved about that, and I wait for someone to ask or inquire about what I do and what I've done and what I know about because the last thing I'd want to do is to bore someone or to come across as some type of ego-driven engineer. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm just
yeah.
always interested in that fine line between not pride, but humbleness or whatever, and the too much ego, that sort of thing.
Well,
In-
I have the kind of relatives that will bring the humble aspect of that because they don't care about any of that thing. So I would start sharing, and they would just okay, and they stuff me back into the bottle where I came from, and I learned that was really a quick lesson for me. I learned that I'm excited, but not everybody else is. So, but I can say this: the particular job that I've had and the things that I've shared, people are interested. So I rarely run into a situation, except for my relatives, where people aren't interested in what I have to share. And I try to share things with when I do share information with a little bit of wit and humor and fun and stuff like that, and it comes across pretty well.
exactly, and that's how I like to do it as well, always with a laugh. Now Did you work on the Star Wars program?
I
Did you?
worked on SDI Strategic Defense Initiative, which is called the Star Wars program.
Yeah, that
I
always
worked
confounded
on
me. That as a child, when they said that.
yeah, the reason they called it Star Wars is because Star Wars was popular at that time,
Mm.
and they didn't have any. They weren't going to call it Flash Gordon or something older than that, you know. So it was more contemporary. So that's why they called it Star Wars. But basically, it's a multi-layered anti-missile defense system. And back then, there was the USSR was together. It's no longer exists, but it was basically tailored to defeat nuclear missiles that would attack us. And Ronald Reagan had an idea that because up until that time, no one had thought about shooting down missiles. There was always, the Mutual Assured Destruction Treaty, which thought that you shoot at me, I shoot at you, we destroy each other, so let's don't do that.
Mm.
No one thought at that particular time thought, can you even intercept a missile traveling beyond the speed of sound? So that's why we began to develop this multi-layered system that could detect, engage, and destroy certain types of ballistic missiles. And it was really funny because, believe it or not, there's a lot of information out there that should be classified that somehow gets out into the public. And I remember right before I was giving a presentation to the Air Force, because the Air Force, it was their program. I remember right before I went on, publishers, oh no, Popular Mechanics had come up with a 3 or 4 page article on this program that I literally at that time could not even give you the initials of. That was classified. But there it was splattered all across the pages of Popular Mechanics. And I thought, oh my God, some of this stuff actually does leak out there, and some of it is true. Some of it is bogus, and not true. Like I saw a lot of fake things or misdirected informational things on the stealth fighter back when people would have, even engineers when I was working on the B1, they had pictures of the stealth fighter, what they thought it looked like on their desk. And I would walk by and go, that's not it. And what does it look like? Well, that's not it. It was basically, it was the Revell model of it. And that looks nothing like what it really looks like. So there is some information out there, different places, and there's a lot of more bogus information out there about the different government and Department of Defense programs.
So obviously, in that one case, you said something was put on the magazine, and then you, oh crikey, there it is, and we're working on that. Was that quite commonplace?
No, but
In
it
that
did.
they got it right. I mean,
Yes, they well, it usually Popular Mechanics was right on target. I don't know about all these other types of magazines, but or even tabloids. But Popular Mechanics, they did their research. And I mean, we're humans are fallible. We humans aren't perfect. And I remember that, and people do things for various reasons. Sometimes because of financial problems, or there's all types of reasons for people to leak data. But I do remember when I was on the stealth program, I remember walking out into the parking lot after getting off work and seeing several people or different employees they're having their cars searched and being arrested in the parking lot. So they didn't play around, and that happened quite often.
hmm.
And people they do things like that, and it's a grave mistake and damage to their country. But it is something that does exist, unfortunately.
No, that's fair enough. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this question, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But um, any sightings of UFOs while you were working there?
No sightings, but I had a secret clearance, secret gold, which is a few levels up above secret. So secret gold, secret silver, and then secret gold, and then there's TS silver, top secret gold. So I had a secret gold, and I also what we would do is now that's really funny. They're talking about spiffs, now in the news, and we'd rotate who was the custodian of the spiff at that
Or can you
time.
just explain what SPIF is? Sorry, I don't recognize it.
It's a secure publication information facility or something like that.
Okay.
It's where it's locked up away from even the any prying eyes of any sort. Takes a lot of combinations to even get in there, and it's stored with all types of classified documents in file cabinets, and
Okay.
even the file cabinets are locked. So because only a few of us in that particular group that we were working had secret gold or higher, what we would do is we couldn't really hire someone to monitor the documents, so we would all volunteer, and we would all have shifts of being the custodian of the classified documents. So I've done that quite a bit. So when it was my turn to be custodian, I got a chance to look through the documents that were pertinent to what I was working on. And in there was a lot of information that I would say was not sourced in the normal Department of Defense ways. So there was some mysterious information in there about different types of configurations and things that could have been non-terrestrial, maybe.
Okay.
It was, yeah, it's hard to talk about that.
I know, I appreciate it. I get what you're alluding to, and we'll probably just leave it there. But
Yeah.
it sort of like corroborates what's out there with the whole David Grush thing, one would assume. Um, so let's move on. So I love the fact that we've gone through that first because that gives that grounding for you on that science level so that when the other stuff really hits you, it's like that big dichotomy, from A
Mm-hmm.
to B. So while you were working on the space station, you had your um, experiences. Can you go into those on a detail level? What happened exactly, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Like I said, after I went to I went to the doctor and got a clean bill of health mentally and physically. On the first night, I knew that it usually I would wake up in the middle of the night feeling paralyzed. And I would start feeling like the room was shaking, like a vibration. And I did what I did is I didn't know. Hope that wasn't me. Hope that was you. I Let me turn this off just in case. Hold on a second.
If it could have been my chair creaking,
Oh, okay.
it needs a good
Uh,
oiling.
yeah. So anyway, what I did is I set up that particular day to do everything that led to it to happen on a day that I it happened normally. So in other words, I ate dinner at the same time. I went to bed at the same time, and I tried to duplicate everything that I knew preceded it. And that first night, I woke up in the middle of the night feeling paralyzed, and I thought, okay, let me relax. And I began to relax. And all of a sudden, the bed started shaking. And it wasn't like an earthquake, even though I'm in California and that happens quite a bit. It was like an oscillation, like an electronic type of vibrational thing,
Hmm.
frequency. And
Yeah.
I all of a sudden I could see. And I knew I didn't open my eyes. And I normally I wear glasses. And I knew I hadn't gone to bed with my glasses, so I was really puzzled as to why I could see my room so clearly without glasses. And then there was something I noticed is that normally if I'm sitting in my bed, I have to sit up on my headboard to be able to see the entire television screen, my because my television is at the foot of my bed. And normally I have to sit up to see the television screen. But from this particular perspective that I was at, not only could I see the entire television screen, but I could actually see where the television touched the floor, which I would have to be standing, literally almost standing in my bed to be able to see my television from that angle. So I was staring at that puzzled at how come that was going on. And then I wasn't thinking about it. It wasn't. It was the last thing I possibly would have thought about. All of a sudden, this humanoid shaped, transparent figure disappeared by the foot of my bed. I mean, by the side of my bed, not too far from me. And I stared at it, and I was almost terrified. And it said my name, Albert, like that. And I have to tell you that really terrified me. All I could think about was, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I want to go back. I want to go back. And it literally felt like I was picked up and slammed onto the bed. And I woke up with a fright, like that. And I was really vibrating really bad. And I grabbed my diary, which was on the journal, which was on my nightstand. And went running through my house, turning on all the lights in the house and sitting down. And I began to document this. And I was rattled because
Mm.
I didn't believe in that stuff. I hadn't to call my name. And I mean, yeah, I knew I had some childhood memories of bizarre things, but to me, they were always dreams. They were never anything, in the real world. And because I was looking at my bedroom from an awareness in the real world, for that to happen was very, very, it got my attention, let's say.
I was going to say, now looking back at it,
Mhm.
what would you say it was? A lucid dream or an outer body experience?
Well, because it kept repeating itself, initially, let's say, if it only happened that at one particular time, I would have thought it was maybe a lucid dream, because I wouldn't have enough data to draw any other conclusion.
Sure.
But because it kept happening, and and I just went on for months experimenting and learning things and expanding on because it actually began. I had a procedure to have it happen to me, to cause it to happen about 7 out of 10 times, sometimes 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 times. And it kept expanding on that. I knew that it wasn't a lucid dream, especially on On the second night, I remember I was talking to a friend of mine at work, and I said, you know, some strange things are happening to me at night, and I don't, you know, and I explained to her what was happening, and she said, you should go talk to this doctor who has had a near death experience, and she may be able to explain some of the things that are is happening to you. And so I did. The doctor taught a class at a college not too far from where I lived, and so I went to see that doctor during the class, and I sat there and I waited in the back, and she started talking about her near death experience and seeing other relatives and that type of thing. And then she looked at the audience and she said, has anybody ever felt paralyzed that night? And outside of my family, no one had ever even acknowledged that that existed. And I was shocked. And I raised my hand and I said, yes, yeah. I said, that happens to me all the time. And she looked at me and she was the very first person that said, you may be on the verge of having out of body experiences. And I have to tell you, I laughed because I thought that was ridiculous. And I said, I'm a scientist. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. And she said, you can't tell me what you don't know. And I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. And because I was having these experiences 3 times a night, I thought, well, I'll go home and it's easy for me to see if that's true. And she said, I'll tell you what, if it does happen to you tonight, she says, think about coming to see me and see what happens. So that night, I, I ate at the same time, 6 o'clock. I did all the same things that I'd been doing before to lead up to this vibrational paralyzed situation. And that night I felt paralyzed just like before. I felt the vibration, which was really, really intense the more I relaxed. And then I thought about the teacher and I said, I want to go visit her. And this was the first time. I've had many, many, many flying dreams before, but this was the first time that I actually felt hands grab me on my shoulders, not hurting me or anything, but like, and I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the hands grab me and start pushing me toward the window of my bedroom. And the next thing I knew, I passed through the window, and that was such a strange feeling. It's almost like ever taking a bubble bath and you have the bubbles in the tub and you poke your finger into the bubble, but it doesn't burst. It just kind of adheres or sticks
Yeah,
to
yeah.
your that's what the glass felt like. It was really strange. And then next thing I knew, I was above the city lights at night, flying very, very, very fast. And I thought I didn't seem to be in control of the direction I was heading, but I could control the altitude and I control the speed in which I was traveling. So I thought I want to fly higher, and I began to fly higher. And this wasn't alien to me because it was just like all the flying dreams I had ever had before, except it started off very, very differently. So it wasn't like this was my first time, and how was I able to do these things? It's because I'd been doing it all along. I just never had the paralysis and the hands grab me before. So I said I want to go higher, and I was able to go higher. I said I want to go faster, and I was able to go faster. And then all of a sudden, I was drawn down into this neighborhood that I'd never been before, and to this house and toward the roof. And I thought I was going to crash into the roof, and actually penetrated the roof. And as I was slowly going down through the roof, I could see the insulation in the roof and wiring and all that in the attic. And eventually I ended up in this bedroom, and the hands let go of me. And I'm looking around the bedroom, and I noticed that in the bed in front of me was the teacher that said, come visit me. And I thought, okay, this is probably a dream. And I looked at her and I thought, okay, I noticed that I knew she was married, but her and her husband didn't sleep in the same bed. He was in another bed, or someone was in another bed. I assume that was her husband, and way on the other side of the room. And I thought, well, that's something strange to remember if I'm really here. And I looked at her, and one of her legs was outside of the covers, and it had this big white bandage kind of thing on it. And it looked like a cast. as if she'd broken her ankle or something. And I thought, okay, that's a good thing to remember. And another thing is this, I don't tell this to very many people just because it's kind of, some people can absorb and some people react very it's frightened by it. Is all of a sudden by the head of her bed, by her, this brilliant humanoid figure appeared out of nowhere. And it wasn't threatening, but it just, the fact that it was there and I thought I was dreaming, it just startled me. And I thought, okay, I'm done with this. I want to go back. And I felt the hands grab me again. The scenery blurred. I mean, it exited and moved away from me rapidly. And the next thing I knew, I was slammed into my bed and in my body just like the night before. And I was vibrating again, just like before. And I grabbed my journal and turned on the lights and went running through the house, turning on all the lights and sat down and began to write in my journal what happened to me. So on the third day, I thought, okay, the teacher would say it was a Sunday, I believe. And the teacher was having a class on Sunday at the particular college. So I went and I sat in the back of the room again. And during the break, I couldn't wait to talk to her. During the break, I walked up to her and I said, I said, I had another one of those experiences last night. And I said, remember you said to come see you. And I said, I looked at her leg and I said, in my dream that I had, you had a broken leg. And I saw this white cast wrapped around it. And she said, no, she said, I do sleep with a white heating pad on my leg at night because I have arthritis in my knee, but it's not a cast. And I thought, well, that's kind of a coincidence. And I said, in the dream that I had, you slept in one bed, and I think your husband slept way on the other side of the room in another bed. And she said, yeah, she says, my husband has sleep apnea and snores at night terribly. And that put him way on the other side of the room so I can get some sleep. And I thought, is this a coincidence? Did this really happen? Well, how could she confirm what my dream? That didn't make any sense. And that was the beginning of me verifying the things that I was experiencing, which slowly changed it because I am a researcher and I like repeatability. It slowly changed it from being a lucid dream or just a dream to actually being something I didn't understand, but I knew it had to deal with my particular consciousness. And I never thought of that consciousness as being a soul or spirit or anything like that. But because of this continued experiments, I began to draw the line that I am a spiritual being and I do have a soul.
And how did that sit with you at that time when you were clearly a logical being, and then all of a sudden you're opened up to this big world of spirituality? There must have been a period where you were like, whoa, I'm all over the place.
Well, it opened up. I think it presented more questions than it answered because I started thinking, well, if I'm a spiritual being, then everyone is a spiritual being. And if everyone's a spiritual being, what are we doing here? Why are we here? Why does a spiritual being come here? Does a spiritual being have a beginning and an end, or is it timeless according to all the literature and religious doctrine that because I was raised Catholic, that we talk about an afterlife, we talk about heaven and and all of these questions started coming to me to find out. I wonder if through these experiences, can I understand and understand and answer some of these questions that I was having? And that began my journey toward really enthusiastically pursuing this thing that I now know is out of body experience or astral projection, as some metaphysicians say. And it began to change my perspective, because I no longer looked at a person as just an individual or human, and I began to look at people as a soul having a human experience.
Now, I got some questions about that experience where you went to see the lady. Obviously, let's talk about the buzzing part. What do you put that down to being, the buzzing?
Well, Everything vibrates. I mean, matter vibrates, has a certain vibration.
Yeah, yeah,
The slower it is, the more solid it is. Our bodies are at a certain vibration that we never really pay attention to it. We have electricity flowing through our body that has a, a measurable vibration, or you can measure the waves on the electricity going from the brain to muscle, things like that. But then there's another aspect of us that we're generally not aware of because most, our education, public schools or whatever, never talk about it, especially in Catholic school. So the soul or the spirit consciousness or whatever label you want to put on it vibrates at a higher level. The As you go through the from just the physical body to transitioning consciousness into that second body, as Robert Monroe would call it, that you experience the difference in change in vibration. So it begins to increase as you move from the lower physical to the next level, and you become very, very aware of that vibrational change and increase until you settle down into the second body. And that's how I began to understand it. So I began to realize that, first of all, it doesn't feel very good because you feel like you can't breathe. You feel like maybe there's a weight on your chest. There's a lot of, I call them road signs. There's a lot of road signs that are happening during that transition, that you may hear a loud buzzing sound. You may hear your name being called, or you may feel like you're being touched, or you feel like you're sinking through the bed, like the weight on your chest has gotten so heavy that you feel like you're moving down through the bed. So all of that can be frightening if it's the first time you've experienced it, or if you've experienced it many times without any explanation as to what was happening to you. So that's what was happening to me, is I realized that the faster I moved from the lower physical, meaning relaxation and accepting what was happening to me, to moving into the second body, the fewer and fewer road signs I would experience that would cause this discomfort, and it would make it a lot easier and a lot less. I'd be a lot less fearful about it, and I began to. It's like riding a bike with training wheels all your life, and then someone pulls off the training wheels, and now you realize, oh my goodness, I never needed those. I can ride the bike regularly. Well, that's
yeah,
what happened. As I suddenly feel like I can ride this bike and explore and find out what's happening. And I wasn't looking for spirituality. I wasn't looking for religious verification. I wasn't looking for anything, life after death, reincarnation, all of those things, that have heard about in different books on the subject, metaphysical books. I wasn't looking for any of that. I was just trying to explain what was happening to me as an individual. And to tell you the truth, I've been taught all kinds of things. When I was an altar boy in Catholic school, they taught me about the Bible and all kinds of things, but that was a belief system that I accepted. What was happening to me had nothing to do with belief. It had to do with an experience, and experiences bring on a knowing. So no matter what anyone else in the world said about this experience, I knew it was happening to me, especially because I could repeat it over and over again.
Hmm. Now, with the buzzing, I know to harp on about it. Is there a nearest physical thing that, as in like in the 3D realm now, that you could put it down to? I mean, I don't know if you've ever been electrocuted, put your finger on a plug or anything. What's the closest, do you think?
I don't have an explanation for it except that it appears when you're transitioning out of the physical, when you're in the physical, you're limited to the information that your five senses provide you. So certain, audio, taste, and all that. But
Hmm.
as you're transitioning from the physical to a second body, astral body, whatever you want to call it, it has a multitude of senses, and they're all heightened. Meaning that if there's a buzzing or a loud sound, I don't even know why the rushing wind, but I don't. It's extremely, extremely loud. It may be just a natural um, a side effect of the transition process. I don't know exactly, and I don't want people to focus too much on it, except to realize it's a road sign. You're headed in the right direction. Don't get stuck there. Keep moving because it doesn't feel very good while it's happening because of the breathing and all that. So it just may be something that has to do with a physics that we haven't understood, we don't understand just yet. I don't know, but because it happens every time, it is definitely related. And I wish that I had the ability to measure the frequency and things like that, but because of the circumstances and surrounding why it happens, I'm not sure if we'll be able to explain it in physical terms ever
Mm.
or in scientific terms. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. It would almost be, it's going to be impossible for you to to work out what that frequency is, isn't it? Let's be fair.
Right.
Now, what do you put down the hands to being that grabbed you and pushed you, and or at least guided you, should we say, to that lady?
Well, when I was 5, I heard the voice call me. I mean, and I saw an image at the end of my bed. And when I was 35, I was looking at the television, touched the floor, and something appeared next to me and called my name, non-threatening. So, you know, in Catholic religion, and they always talked about a guardian angel. But they would show the guardian angel, and it would have wings, and it was very biblical. And I never really embraced that, even though I was raised Catholic. Um, Never thought of there being something else around me, but little indications. I mean, started happening that I wasn't alone. I didn't know what this thing was exactly at the time, but I realized I'm not alone. It seems to be there. I may not always be able to detect it, but because like I couldn't see it when it put its hands on me, but I could tell, I could feel the fingers. Sometimes I could see it, sometimes I could. So I started wondering, is this a guardian angel, or is this something that is there something I don't understand about myself? Maybe there's multiple dimensional aspects of a soul, meaning that usually only in the physical um, is there something singular. But if there's non-physical, like air, is air one thing or is it a bunch of molecules and it's all over the place and it's not restricted? And that's where I started wondering about the soul. And maybe the soul was multidimensional and this was one aspect of myself. I didn't understand exactly what it wanted or why it was there, but maybe that's what it was. And that was a theory that I had. And so what I did is I decided to explore that theory, to try to communicate, to try to connect with whatever this was, because obviously it was there, and I had no control over that. And if it wanted to harm me, it could have done so since I was 5 years old. So it had a long time to do that. And when it spoke to me, I have to say it was a comforting voice. It didn't seem hostile or something like that. And when it touched me, it seemed comforting and caring. So I started exploring through other travels and experiences, out of body experiences that I had. I started trying to connect with this other aspect of myself. And then something happened that literally changed me forever. Didn't plan on it. I didn't even know it existed. One night while I was having the paralysis happen, and began to say things like, "I want to float upward," and could feel the movement, and I actually felt myself lifting upward out of the physical body. And someone said to me, because I started reading books on near death experiences, and I remember in Embraced by the Light, Betty said something about the light, and that it was this, she said Jesus or God, and I thought, well, I want to know what is the light while I was in that state. And all of a sudden, I felt the hands grab me again and push me through the wall. There was a spot. It was really strange. There was a little spot on the wall, and it began to grow as I began to approach it. And it began to get bigger and bigger, and the spot was very, very dark, like a blackness. It was like a void. And the hands pushed me through that spot on the wall, which turned out to be an opening, not a something two dimensional. And I found myself in this darkness, this void, but I was moving really rapidly toward in a particular direction. I could see lights that moving slower than I was passing by me. Um, they were moving slower, so I was passing by them. And then at the end of this void, in the distance, I could see this spark of some sort. It reminded me of the Fourth of July sparklers. Well, I know you're in the
Sure, sure.
UK, but the Fourth of July sparklers that we used to play with when I was a kid. It was the shards and sparkles. Were going off in all directions. As I began to get closer and closer, it was probably, I can describe it as the most brilliant light source I've ever seen with what I thought were my eyes, because they
Sure.
weren't my physical eyes, but it was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. And as I began to get even closer, the sparks and the shards coming off of this began to hit me, and actually not just hit me, but penetrate through me. And I felt as if every time one of the sparks hit me, it removed something from me that I no longer needed. And all of us, after a while being bathed in this light, I felt, and this is the way I describe it, is I felt spiritually naked. Like everything I'd ever thought about, or every secret I'd ever had, or anything that I kept to myself, was laid out on the table for this spark of light and myself to go over to review. And it was, I have to say, it was overwhelming, and it was needed and wanted. Wanting something that I never knew existed is kind of strange. And I realized, okay, at the end, how this ended is I ended up moving back down the away from it, and moved into my room and into my, I didn't feel like I was slammed in my bed this time. I moved into the physical body, and it took me a while to reconnect, because I could move the second body, but I couldn't move the physical for a few minutes, even though they were occupying the same space. And then um, I tried to move just my little finger or something, and I ended up could feel my hand, and all of a sudden everything reconnected. And when I was able to open my physical eyes, because of the emotional impact that experience had on me, tears flowed out of my eyes into the pillow, because I had a realization of something. And and I have to say, it hasn't changed since then. I realized, oh my God, that's my natural state of being. This is not my natural state. That is it, because I felt like I was literally home. And with that feeling, I lost the fear of death, because I knew that maybe my physical body wouldn't survive death, but my consciousness or soul, or whatever you want to call it, would. And it has, it before it became who I am today, it existed in that state. And that changed me in a lot of ways, where I I'm different to this day. And I didn't understand it back then. Some people called it a Kundalini experience, but I didn't know what that was. All I know is that I had this experience that was into the light. And I joined the International Association of Near Death Studies, because approximately 8 million people in the United States alone have had near death experiences, which I didn't know.
No, I didn't
And
know that either. It's a lot,
yeah,
isn't it?
that's a lot of people.
Hmm.
That's because, and it's increased because we've developed the medical technology to bring people back when their hearts have stopped. So we're able to do that a lot more, resuscitate
Yeah.
individuals. So we had, so out of that, not everybody has this kind of experience, but the people who did started talking about it. And I, like I said, I talked about Embraced by the Light. And I started going to these meetings, and I started listening to these people who died on the operating table, who had these experiences during a car accident and all of that. And they started talking about the light. And as they shared their experience about the light, it turned out to be exactly how I experienced it. But I hadn't had a near death experience. So I started wondering, oh my God, they're having a trauma which dislodges their spirit or soul. And I'm having these vibrational things that are happening, which also dislodges my spirit or soul. And I'm just like them, and they're just like me, except the near death experience, you're like a passenger in the experience. But in the out of body experience, you're actually driving the car. And that's how I started looking at it. And with taking the wheel of my experience rather than being a passenger, it started opening the doors up to even more amazing experiences.
It is an amazing thing. Now, I want to ask you a question here. Do you think the fact that you are able to do this was meant to be, i.e., it's put you on a different path completely?
Without a doubt. And it's not like, it's like there's something happening, and I'm a part, it's like a wheel with but different spokes. I'm one of those spokes. I'm no different or no more special than any other spoke, but together we control this movement that's progressing, that's moving on. And this was my particular area that I was supposed to share, talk about, because like I said, think about this. Here's a guy, an engineer, just a basic engineer in aerospace from Los Angeles, who jots down a diary of his experiences, and that diary becomes a number one times bestseller. That makes no sense at
I bet
all.
that surprised you, didn't it?
That yeah, I began to think, what is going on here? That people want to read this thing that's happening to me. That the witches are writing me story. My grandmother's
Mm.
telling me there's something. So that began to tell me, Al, it's bigger than you. It's way bigger than you, and you're a part of it. And this is your part. Also, I'd spend 27 years or more that I've been doing this, maybe on 3 decades since my book came out in 1996, the first one. I've had people write me from all over the world. And so I've gotten wonderful letters from the UK too, and other places. And not everyone is happy go lucky. Some people are having a lot of traumas in their life, and a lot of sad, negative things have happened to them. I've had individuals who wrote me who were suicidal, and they were kind enough to put their phone number in the letters, and I called them on the phone, and I want to talk to them. And some of them, to make a long story short, is that there was an individual who lost his wife. He was in his 50s, and he was thinking of committing suicide so he could join her. And I shared some things with him and talked to him about that, and said that that might change your vibration, which hers might be a little higher because of this, because we're here for a reason. There's no accidents. We have a job to do, a spiritual job to do, and that's affecting each other or whatever we do. And I shared with him, and here it is. It's been 15 years since I got his letter, and what's wonderful about this is every year or so he writes me an email to let me know that he's okay, and he's pressing on, and he's embracing life, his spiritual life. And to me, if that never, that's happened many times, but if it only happened once, that feeds my soul, and that tells me why I'm here. Because there's a
Mm.
guy out there that is still alive because of the spiritual experiences I had and I shared with him, and he's still here with us on earth. So, there's no greater reward to me than something like that.
Yeah, so sharing the experiences is vital almost, isn't it? It's your calling,
Definitely.
so to speak. Let's get to the nuts and bolts of OBEs. I kind of have some sort of like questions about the process and stuff. So I've written a few down. So are OBEs part of a sleep state, or can it be done when conscious, or have yours only ever been when you're going to sleep?
No, it's not. It's not. I say stubborn souls like mine need the sleep process, but people there. I mean, it's really not a new thing. Spirit journeys have been happening for a long, long, long time. Monks meditate, and you can project out of your body. Joggers who have been jogging and get into some kind of rhythm and hypnosis, and then have reported seeing, floating above their bodies while watching their bodies run.
Well, that's a
Um,
weird one.
yeah, that'd be
Whoa.
kind of strange. That never happened to
Mm.
me, but I've heard about that, and I've had letters on the subject. So there are many ways of having an out of body experience, which a near death experience is an out of body experience also. So there's many ways of doing it, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to the sleep process. It's just the sleep process makes it a lot easier for people like me and for a lot of other people who find it very difficult to clear your mind during meditation
Mm.
or to even want to go jogging.
Yeah, not no on the jogging.
Yeah.
The traveling part. Um, Now earlier you mentioned about with the hands, and they guided you to the lady's location. Um, were you traveling normal geography? As in, were you
No.
going across a city, or is it just like through a subspace sort of thing?
Sometimes, it's yes and no. Sometimes in the early stages of it, it would be all physical world, places that I could probably go, like my friend's house and see her house physically. But then there's another aspect or far beyond. And I like to equate it with, and the Bible says, in my father's house, there are many mansions. Well, there are like many different levels of vibration that you can call the astral plane is one of them, which is, think about this. Let's see. That's how I like to describe it. Imagine having a a picture of a glass beaker, and in
Okay.
that glass beaker, you take some dirt, and the dirt represents the physical plane, Earth, where we are, your job, and all that. And you pour that dirt in there about 4 or 5 inches of the beaker. Then we have a picture of water, and the water represents the next level up, maybe the astral plane. So we take the water and we pour it into the beaker, and right where the water and the dirt touches and meets each other, there's going to develop a muddy kind of stage. So at the very bottom of the beaker, it's still dry, like on the earth plane. But as you move up through the beaker, you go into the muddier area and it gets wet and wet. And as you continue after the water is settled down, after you continue up, it starts to become turbid or foggy, and it starts as you continue to move up the beaker, it becomes clearer and clearer until you're into a part of the beaker that has no mud in it at all. Well, that's kind of how the astral plane is. Part of it is here, creating the muddy aspect of it. So some of it doesn't even go lower than that. But then as you move up through it, eventually the physical world that you can perceive slowly starts to disappear. And eventually you get to the part where it's clear, where there is no physical world. So that's kind of how it works. And beyond that, there's even higher aspects of it where I found that the second body or astral body, that if you want to call it that, you can actually leave out of that too, and to gain higher vibrational levels. So and that is when I, in my personal experience, and other people who've had these experiences, that's when you have angelic like experiences, because not every, and then there's going to be encounters. I always say this: being afraid of spirits and ghosts and having out of body experiences is like being afraid of fish and going into the ocean. That's where they are. It's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
it's gonna happen. So that you just have to be aware of that. Not all are going to be positive. Not all are going to be, angels and things like that. Some are just going to be like yourself or lower. But then as you move up that beaker of water and it starts getting clearer and clearer, then you start moving into higher levels of consciousness. And as you move even higher, you run into things that you never knew existed. You wanted to believe existed, like guardian angels and higher selves and things like that, but it actually does exist at the higher levels.
So, taking your muddy water beaker analogy, then for the traveling perspective, so going to that lady's house, you were mud down here, the earth plane. Yeah, we're going up
Yeah,
into the murky or just slightly above that. Then you're traveling, and because you're traveling close to the earth plane, you're seeing the streets and God knows what else.
right.
But if you got to the higher part and you wanted to go somewhere, you wouldn't see it. You would just transport that sort of thing. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like when I went to see the light. I could no longer perceive my bedroom. It didn't exist at all. And think about this. It's like in my room right now and in your room that you're in, we know, you and I both know, um, outside of your five senses, there are radio waves bouncing off the walls or going through your room right as we speak. Because you
Mm-hmm.
could take your radio out and you could turn it on and you could hear the radio or even the static from the station. Well, our five senses aren't capable of picking up those higher frequencies. That's why we can't see them and that's why we can't perceive it. But when you get into their second body, the radio dial all of a sudden goes up and you can turn it up to even higher. So it's not like a light switch, but it's a gradual progression like a rheostat. And as you turn up your awareness and your vibration, you become less aware of the lower channels on the station and more aware of the higher channels on the
Yeah,
station.
makes sense.
And that's kind of how it works. And the actual controlling or if effect you can have on your spiritual growth is very, very complex. It has a lot to do with um, fear. It has a lot to do with anger. It has a lot to do with all those things that we experience in our daily lives that we have to gradually and work on, and it's very difficult, especially fear, is to evolve beyond. If we can evolve beyond those, then we have access to even higher states of being and states of consciousness and encounters that I call are like angelic encounters, which is a Christian term. And so I want to use the non-Christian term, which Robert Monroe shared that the encounters that he would have would be with intelligent species, inspects, he called them. So these would be beings of light or other beings that have non-physical that were at a higher awareness than we are currently in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think getting over the fear is quite difficult for a lot of people, isn't it?
That
That
seems to be why we're here, is to get over the fear, the lack of knowledge, or I mean, so a lot of times I'm really a very creative, imaginative person. And I would say that a lot of the fears that I've ever experienced in my life has generally been because of that imagination that I have. Not saying that there aren't some things to be aware of and be leery of, but most of the things I've been afraid of in my life has been because I've created it inside of myself, and it's been some kind of fear. Like I would have negative experiences on the astral plane when I first started because I brought a lot of fear into the situation. And generally, if I'm afraid before I go, then strange things can happen and not so pleasant things. Like I experienced one early on where I thought I was feeling some type of pain from something that was being or something that was there. And it really felt like pain. And when I woke up, I could almost rub my arm to thinking, oh my God, that felt like it was real, but it wasn't. And it had to do with some of the negativity that, I mean, no one's perfect, but some of the negativity that I'd brought into the situation, thinking that, it was part of the situation when it only existed back at the dirt part of the beaker and not in the muddy or clear part of the astral plane.
have you ever seen I'm sure you have. Empire Strikes Back. Star
Yes.
Wars.
Oh, sure, of
Is that
course.
scene? Yeah, that scene in the cave where Luke goes in
Yep.
and Yoda says, "What's in there? Only what you take with you."
That's
Is it that?
exactly what I was thinking of.
Mm, that's exactly what it
Exactly
is.
that. And
Perfect.
it's really, I think it's interesting that Lucas would put that in his movie, because when I saw it, I thought, I wonder if
Mm,
someone was giving him some spiritual information or metaphysical information to to share and develop this character in the story, because that is a great example of what I'm talking about. Is that everything, okay, let me tell you this. My
hmm
mother is 80 was 80 years old when she started having when I told her first about these experiences. She lived to be 90, but at 80 years old, she had been suffering from the witch ride stories and all the things my grandmother had told her while she was a little girl, and the night paralysis and all those the voices and all that. She was having it too, but it was terrifying to her because she based her fear on everything that my grandmother said, which was all negative.
Yeah.
So one day I said, Mom, I said, all those negative things and the witch rides and all that grandma shared with us. I said, I don't believe that that's what's happening. And I shared with her some of the things that I'd learned that I have already shared with you. And that's in my book. And I said, Mom, the next time you have this experience, instead of trying to fight your way out of it and being frightened like you normally are, like you have been for 8 decades, I said, relax, and see what happens. Just try to slow your breathing and see what happens. About 3 o'clock in the morning, of a few days later, the phone rang, and I picked up the phone at 3 o'clock, and I said, "Hello, who is this?" And there was this irate woman on the phone, and she was saying, oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened. You're not going to believe what happened." And I said, "Who is this?" And she said, "It's your mother. It's your mother." I said, what happened? And she said, I woke up in the middle of the night like I have many, many times. And I was just about ready to, because I was paralyzed, and I was just about ready to fight my way out of it like I normally do. And I thought about what you said. So I began to relax. And she said, after that, she said, all of a sudden, I felt someone holding my hand, gently caressing my hand. And she said, I felt like I was moving upward, like I was floating. And she said, all of a sudden I could see, and I was looking up at the ceiling, and I wanted to know who was holding my hand. And she said, I looked over into the person that was holding my hand, and I looked into the face of my guardian angel. So that's how her experience was. And I have to say, after that, she never had all those negative experiences that she had grown up with. Her perspective began to change. She began to shed some of the fear that she had about that, and began to have more positive, angelic like experiences. And it never went back to the way it was. So,
Mm.
with that kind of proof for me, and I echo the same kind of experiences as other people, with that kind of proof, that tells me that most of the experiences that I had were negative, were based on the fear that I took into the situation that I didn't need. Similar, and which was like when I talked about the spark, eliminating things going through me and eliminating pieces
Yeah.
of me that I no longer needed. That was what it was doing. It was eliminating some of the fearful aspects of my reality that no longer served me.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate of the phrase "let it go," and that serves this exactly. Now the you hear a lot of talk of the chord. Now I've heard you on other radio shows not mention the chord. Is there one? Has your mind changed since?
Some people perceive it. I have not yet. I don't know. I don't know if it's. I know this is that if you believe something, belief system has a lot to do with our experiences, and I call it like it's like a filter. I think if you as you release some of these experiences that are filters, you began to have a clearer and clearer perspective on what's really happening. I don't know about the silver cord because I don't know anybody that has really begun to explore this that still talks about that. But that's okay, because if you are afraid, and a lot of people are when they have that, Some I get letters on a lot of people feel that if they have an out of body experience and they go out somewhere, they won't be able to find their way back to their body. And if you need a silver cord to guide you back to the physical body, which a lot of people have talked about, that's perfectly all right. I never needed a silver cord to guide myself back to my physical body because I never believed in the out of body experiences to begin with.
Yeah.
So,
So you created a ladder to get back in. So
yeah,
you think that cord is just like a manifestation of someone's worry, and they're putting on their own tethers to make sure they get back, sort of thing. It's not really
because,
there, but it's like a
because
message.
I haven't had the experience, I can only say this is that it doesn't appear to be global. So it's
Okay.
not everybody, it's a small portion of the people. And the people that I know who are becoming, I wouldn't say experts because no one's going to be an expert at this, but the people who've gotten better at this don't talk about it. So the only thing I can surmise is that maybe it has to do with that fear because a lot of people do share that fear of not being able to return back or someone getting into your body or something like that. Maybe it has something to do with that. And there's an aspect of ourselves inside and outside, because you run into things that may be providing that as reassurance that it's okay and you will have, you can find your way back. I, I can't think of any other rationale for the silver cord other than that because of my experiences and input from other people.
Oh, fair play. Now, you mentioned earlier about when you went to visit the lady and the white heating pad was, basically corroboration essentially, and you passed that off to her. Have you got any other stories like that where you've done other OBEs and have come back with indications that you were at a physical location?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I was like, I was still skeptical even after that. And I was for a long time. I still thinking it was a lucid dream for a long time. But then I mentioned before that I had a friend at work on the space station and that I shared with, and I felt
Yeah.
like I could share with her. And she was the one who referred me to the doctor who had the near death experience. Well, down in further into the investigation period that I was, my 10-day period, I said to her, I said, I told her about the doctor and I said, I'm going to try and come see you next time. And she said, okay, that's fine. I didn't know where she lived physically, but I knew her, which is really important.
Hmm.
Um, so during one night, I think it was the fifth night or so, I lay down, and by this time, I was developing certain techniques that seemed to work for me. Relaxation, tightening, and relaxing the muscles one at a time, starting with either your head or your feet and moving up the body, and laying perfectly still, flat on your back, come in a comfortable position. So I started coming up with different techniques that accelerated my transition from the lower aspect of my physical awareness to the higher. So as I did that, I found myself floating upward, and now it was no surprise to me that I could see because I was becoming a little bit more used to it. And I said, I want to visit, and her name was Kim. And I mentioned this story is in my book. I want to visit Kim. And then I felt the hands grab me again, push me through the glass, similar experience, found myself flying high above the city lights and neighborhoods, just like before, except now I'm becoming a little bit more becoming used to it. And I experimenting. I'm always experimenting with speed. I really want to. I don't think I hit the limit yet, but I always want to know how fast I can go, and I always want to know how high can I go, and the moon is no exception. So I'm always doing stuff like that. So I began to experiment with that as I was being drawn to in a particular direction. I had no choice in the direction, I guess because I'd already made my request, but I could experiment with all the different things happening between it. Found myself, and this was interesting too. This was a more interesting one. Um, the hands brought me down into this neighborhood, into the middle of the street, and let go of me. And now I'm standing in the middle of the street, and I'm looking around, and I had forgotten why I was there. I'd forgotten that I'd asked to see my friend, and it took me a while to remember. And that was just a hint of something that you don't have your brain with you. You don't Your brain is really capable of remembering physical things that are really mundane to the soul. The soul doesn't care about a lot of this stuff.
Hmm.
So it's very difficult to download information into the soul so that the soul can be aware of both worlds. So it took me a while to try to remember what was I trying to do, because I was so excited to just to fly and all that. I didn't care about that. It seemed ridiculous. But I thought, oh yeah, I wanted to see my friend. And I said, I said it again. I want to see my friend Kim. And the hands grabbed me again, held on to me. And I went up, I approached this apartment building, two-story apartment building, and went through one of the walls, and I found myself in the dining room, like with a table, and it had this huge chandelier in the dining room, and the chandelier was so big, it dominated the dining room. It was too big for the room. And I thought, okay, if I'm really here, that's something interesting to remember. And then I remember moving down the hallway, and you can move. And so by this time, I was experimenting with flight and sliding through the floor like the old Gumby cartoons. I could
I
do
don't know that
that.
one. That must be an
Oh,
American thing.
yeah, this is claymation figure that would put up one foot and he could slide around the room or anywhere, transport. He could transport himself anywhere just by like almost having roller skates without roller skates.
I got you.
So, and you can slide like that, and there's all kinds of ways you can move around. So I kind of slid down the hallway, and I remember one of the doors was open on the right hand side, and I went into that room, and I looked around. There was no one in the room. There were two beds in the room, and normally in one window. Normally in a, I guess from an architectural standpoint, normally when you design a room like that, the window is in the center of the room and the beds might be on either side of the window. But what I noticed about this is that there were two beds, but the window was directly over one of the beds in the corner of the room, which really looked odd. And I went over to the window and I looked out, and half of the window was blocked by a telephone pole. And I could look out of the window and I could see down into there was an alleyway, and there was a dumpster across the way from the alley. And I felt kind of like an astral cat burglar, like maybe I shouldn't be here. So I pushed myself out of the window, same sensation, found myself floating above the alleyway, moved down the alleyway because I was thinking, how can I get back home? So I moved up and I saw a street sign, and I was floating there looking at the street sign, trying to figure out where I was, but I couldn't read it. I mean, I could see the letters, but they made no sense. And that was another clue as to my brain, how it interprets my physical environment versus the soul, because the soul doesn't care about, English letters.
You're not
Might
the
as well.
first person to say that to me, about
Really?
trying to reading an out of body experience, they could not read it.
Yeah, because my soul doesn't care about that. It might as well have been hieroglyphics. It was irrelevant. It was a drop for something that's timeless. If you develop a language for a few hundred years and it goes away or whatever, it doesn't care. Or if it's just on one part of the planet, soul
Mm.
doesn't care about that. So I couldn't read it. And I remember thinking, okay, I want to go back, because generally when I say things like I want, it usually happened. So I thought, I want to go back. I felt the sudden acceleration like I have so many other times. And I felt, boom, I landed in my bed. And instead of jumping up, I turned on the light and began to write all this down. The next day, I went to work, and this was on the space station. I went to work, and I went into Kim's office, and I said, Kim, I had a really, really incredible experience last night. And began to tell her about the chandelier and all that. And she said, I bought this chandelier at a swap meet. It's way too big for my dining room, but I'm keeping it, and I didn't want to leave it in the box. So I hung it up until I move into the house that we're purchasing. I thought, oh, that's a strange coincidence. And I thought, well, and I moved down the hallway to this room on the right hand side, and I went into there, and it was kind of odd. And I said there was a window just in the corner of the room, right above just one of the beds, instead of on either side of in between the two beds. And she said, that is a strange room. She said, She said, I don't know why they put the window there because half of it is blocked by a telephone pole. And I thought, oh my
Mm.
God, oh my God. And I described the rest of what I'd seen and what I experienced, and it matched what she said perfectly. And that's when I went home that night and I sat down thinking about this for a long, long time. And I thought, this is real. This is real? And I thought, well, if it's real, what what's going on and why is it happening and what is that? What part of me is doing this? And that's when all the questions start flooding in of me trying to. I'm wondering. It's not about me. It's not just about me. It's about all of us. All of us here on this planet. We're all the same. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter about geographical locations. None. All of that is irrelevant. We're all the same stuff. We are these physical human beings with some type of soul within us
Mm.
that has a beginning and maybe no end. I don't know, but we're all the same stuff. So why are all these souls here on earth in the first place? Why do we come to this particular planet? Is there other places to go to? Why? What's going on? And that's when I started developing these questions that I wanted to see if I could answer in some kind of way by exploring the non-physical aspect of my consciousness. And thank goodness I didn't get all the answers and I'm still looking for them, but I was able to put a lot of them into my book on what I discovered as far as us being these eternal souls and being able to travel beyond their physical bodies.
It is a lush thing, isn't it? It's a mind blowing thing when you really think about that. We are not what we are. Well, you know
It's
what I mean. We're
beyond
we're
mind blowing
beyond it.
because it's beyond mind blowing because I didn't believe in any of this.
Mm.
To have it happen and then it to become a mainstay in my awareness now, because like I was saying before, everything I was taught in school was part of my belief system, but the experiences I've had, I know that that happens. It's a knowing, and that knowing brings on a peace that I can't even begin to describe to you because I finally feel, and as a teenager and troubled teenager or whatever, as an adult, I finally feel that I know why I'm here and I know who I am that is here. And I know that I have a purpose and that lessens the fear about tomorrow because I know what I'm supposed to do and it gives me purpose beyond what I can ever describe to you.
No, I understand. I've talked with a few other people about the knowing. We've come up with some other examples for it, and I understand that one. Um, Now, Kim, did she was she freaked out by what you said to her, or
No,
did that then push her onto the path?
she is and was amazing. She wasn't into the out of body experience like I was thrusted into because I didn't volunteer, but she was investigating her own metaphysical areas, so to speak, and she talked me into going and have into a psychiatrist that she knew and having a past life regression. So she was a metaphysical spiritual kind of person exploring her own path, and I ended up going with her to this doctor, and I didn't believe in reincarnation or any of that, and I had an experience during the regression that opened up another new area of investigation, and that is reincarnation. So Kim was she was put here to be one of my guides to help me, but because I felt
Mm.
out of all the people in the space station, she was the only one I felt really comfortable with sharing my experiences. I knew she wouldn't judge me. I don't know why I knew that because we never talked about metaphysics before, but I just felt that she would be the one person that I could share this with. And because I did, it ended up opening some other doors to spiritual awareness that I didn't even know existed.
Okay, well let's park that regression one because I want to get back to that at some stage if we've got time. Um, Now, when you are going through objects as part of the OBE, can you feel it or
Yes.
not? You can.
Yes.
So if
Oh,
you went
yeah.
through bricks, you could feel bricks. If you went through glass, you could feel glass. That sort of thing.
Times 10. Times
Weird.
10. So if you felt it with your physical hand and I felt it with my astral hand, I'm going to feel like my blankets. I can rub my hand over my blankets in my physical body. But when I rub my astral appendage, whatever that is,
Yeah.
and when I rub that over it, I feel every thread in that, every loop, every hole, every space, every piece of lint, everything. So one of the things I describe, and it's not just the sensations as far as physical touch, it's also everything is heightened tenfold in that altered state of consciousness because
Is
out
that
of body experience is that.
is that what when people say they've had NDEs, near death experiences, or whatever, or they've been to heaven on a sly? Um, they say that the colors are like colors that you can't describe. Is that the same thing? It's the same
That
colors, but because it's heightened, it looks different.
definitely. Like when I was looking around my room that day, or many times I've done before, I was amazed at what I was seeing because I wear glasses and everything was crystal clear and beautiful and radiant. It had its own aura, so to speak, of
Yeah.
energy coming off of it. So everything was amazing, and it was like it was candy for the eyes kind of thing. So, but there's a negative aspect of that I want to share is that because your senses are heightened tenfold, that means the sense of fear is heightened tenfold too.
Mm.
So if you're afraid of something, the fear is going to be so intense that it's going to convince you that it's real. Doesn't mean it is, but because it feels so intense, it's going to. A lot of people think it must be real. Like I had one lady write me, and she said during her night paralysis, she saw demons at the foot of her bed, and it just terrified her. And I said, "Well, what did they do?" She said, "They just sat there and looked at me." And I said, "Well, God, there's demons. They should be fired because they should be doing something to
Yeah, they're
you."
crap
And
demons.
yeah, I said, "Well, they're not doing their job." But the fact that the fear was so intense, she believed it has to be real and justified. And that's a thing you have to overcome because fear is going to be intense and so intense that you will believe. You might jump to the conclusion this is justified, but there is a positive aspect of that too, is that the feeling of love is also magnified tenfold. So when you have loving encounters and experiences, they're going to be the most incredible experiences that you've ever had in your life. When I shared the space, that void, with this light, and it was piercing through me, I felt a love that I cannot even describe to you. And the only way that I can say one of the ways I can say it affected me is when I opened my eyes and that the tears of joy flowed out of my eyes into my pillow. It was so intense. I've never experienced anything like that in the physical body.
Mm. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that, but maybe, at some stage
Yet,
I will. Well, yes,
yet.
exactly. I'm going to.
Yeah.
Well, I
I've
don't
had
get.
people who've never had an out of body experience to their knowledge. And they've come to my classes that I used to teach and I give them or read my book. And my wife, she never had one until we met and I started talking to her. And all of a sudden she had her first out of body experience at 40 years old. So it doesn't matter if you can't remember or you say you've never had one. Anybody can have one. The key is remembering that you've had one.
Yes. And on that topic, actually, the remembering thing, a question popped into my mind when you were talking about going to see Kim, and then you sort of went down to street level because at that point you forgot where you were going and why you were aiming somewhere. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think if you completely forgot what you were doing, that you could end up lost within that realm and then never go back to your body?
No, no, because this is this is really hard to explain exactly, but I'll try my best.
Okay.
Is I was aware of everything that was still happening to my body, but it wasn't in the forefront. So I was aware of its breathing. I was aware of its existence. I would even be aware if I didn't wake up of my wife rolling over in the bed and the movement. You're not disconnected from the physical body. And if you, the more intense the fear, if you did experience fear, the more intense the fear you encounter, that will be something that will grab you and draw you back faster than anything. Fear will bring you back. Sometimes, and I've had to practice not being fearful, so I didn't get recalled, so to speak. But
Mm.
you're not completely disconnected, I guess, as long as the body is still breathing and it's not like a near death experience kind of thing. You're not totally disconnected from the body, so it's still it's still an avenue that you can return to, and you know, and as long as you're not just distracted by something so fearful, you're just traumatized. Even then, you're gonna come back because you can tell you're breathing. You can feel your heart rate. You're, matter of fact, you're probably more in touch with your physical body than you are right now in the waking state.
Mm. That's good then. That's good news for people. You're not going to get lost in the mist. So get back to the going through objects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you go really slowly through the glass pane, and therefore you're seeing everything, and then all at the same time? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah,
you can do that.
definitely. If you're having, first of all, if you're having a consciously controlled out of body experience without any filters or contaminants, because fear is a contaminant, all kinds of other things can contaminate the experience. If you're not having one of those, you're having a pure experience, then you're in total control. I mean, I can move through my house. I've gone into my son's bedroom and I could see him sleeping, moving out through the window. I would experiment with my hand moving past the glass, or rubbing the, like I said, the my blankets and feeling the fibers in the blanket. You can do all kinds of things that are totally controlled regarding the sense of touch, but that's temporary because the more and more experiences you have, the more and more that's going to seem insignificant, and it's going to shift over to spiritual evolution. That's basically what this is all about. It's about, the physical is a great place, but we can go all kinds of, we can go to Tahiti, Hawaii, all kinds of places in the physical, but it's really about you evolving to something that's even far greater than the physical. I hate to keep repeating myself. In my father's house, there are many mansions. There are many places to go. So uh, spiritual evolution is the goal of all of this, and is going to open up doors to places you never, that the physical things in the physical plane pale by comparison.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The reason I keep harping on about going through objects is because I was thinking about this, right? Is it possible at some stage we as humans could evolve to to all do this, to all do OBE, so that at some stage we could, as a plumber, say, you could use this technique to go into someone's walls and see if there's an issue. Do you think it would ever go to that banal level for us or not?
Um,
Could we use it as a tool, essentially?
e- yes and no. Um, to do something negative, it would be very difficult because you're not alone. Like I said before, there's something else going on, someone else there. And they're kind of, I always think of well, I have to jump ahead. My higher self is always with me. I always think of my higher self as being like a kindergarten school teacher who's watching me play in the sandbox. If I get in over my head, she reaches in and pulls me up and dusts me off and sets me straight. So you have a little bit of freedom, a lot of freedom, but you don't have absolute freedom.
Okay, so we wouldn't really maximize it because it's not really for that purpose, is it? Let's be fair.
Yeah, it's not really for that, and chances are you wouldn't succeed. You might be sucked back into the body and not even know why. It's going to be an exercise in futility in that direction. But if you have everybody's best interest in mind, including yours, then that's the direction you want to head in. because you're going to have more experiences that once you realize, oh, this is amazing, you're not going to look back at going to visit somebody or spy on somebody for non-spiritual reasons. You're not going to look at that at all. That's going to be a waste of your time.
Sure. Years ago, when interviewed by Art Bell, I think on Midnight in a Desert, he asked you if you'd ever felt going through a person. And you said at that stage you'd put it on your bucket list because you hadn't done it. Have you done it since?
No, I haven't. I most people aren't aware. Well, I think I only had maybe one person was aware of me or something being around. But no, I hadn't. I had really forgotten about that, and I hadn't tried that because I should have tried that in the very beginning because things are very different now. Where that just it's
It
a
pales. Mm,
yeah. It's maybe in the beginning if someone have suggested I might have tried it, but now it's not something that my spirit at this stage would even entertain.
sure. It doesn't need it and it doesn't want it, I suppose.
Nah, I
Yeah.
don't see the benefit. I don't see everything is about spiritual evolution and my own personal too. And I don't see how that particular thing would benefit me
No, that's fair enough.
or the other person.
Okay, so on this line of thinking, how far have you gotten now with your skills in this arena? You know, you've obviously done the basics. You would call it basics. You know what I mean? Flying about,
Hmm.
going through things, doing all these wonderful things. But where are you now? What can you do? What have you done?
Um, non-human consciousness encounters is the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
Not every consciousness that you will encounter has been human. Um, there's so much going on out there that is non-terrestrial. I mean, think about it. The universe, or let's reduce it even the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy is vast. How long would it take you to experience every planet and every solar system in the galaxy? A long, long time. And there's a lot to learn out there. Okay, but let's look at how it really is. We're talking about the universe with multiple galaxies out there. So um, the experiences that I'm having now are beyond belief. And I never would have in a million years ever thought it was a reality. But I'm so incredibly grateful that it is because it just made I look up at the sky and people around me and I think, my God, what a wonderful journey we are on. I don't know where we're headed exactly. I believe we're evolving to something higher and greater than ourselves eventually, but where exactly we're going to end up, I don't know. But the journey is a miracle and amazing. And I
Yeah.
think everybody who begins to experience this, it's going to happen no matter what. Even if you don't pursue it this particular time around, hint on reincarnation, it's going to happen eventually because that's the purpose. But those people who embraced it now in this current life form, it is the most incredible journey you could ever have and the most exciting. Multiply it by the best roller coaster you've ever been on by 100. It's like, oh, you just can't get over it. Even when it's over, you're still just in the midst of a thing. Oh my God, that's a wonderful experience. I can't wait to do it again. It's really like that.
Mm.
I'm really grateful. I'm grateful that I didn't spend this particular life asleep and unaware of it.
Which, yeah, a part of this question came into my head while you were talking then with that answer, which is if you look back on your younger self now, before you were switched on, so to speak, what do you think about your younger self?
You know, I without the spiritual perspective, I feel sorry for my younger self because he just didn't know. He didn't know. A lot of the things, choices and decisions and actions I made when I was younger, I just didn't know. If I would have known a lot of things that I know now, there's a ton of decisions that would I would have made differently. But our lives, especially the journey of spiritual evolution, is like a intricate, complex scientific formula. And if we take and change one aspect of that formula, a small portion of it even, the end result is going to be different. So there's nothing I would change, even the negative or what I perceive to be negative aspects of this journey or my formula. There's nothing that I would change because I wouldn't be who I am today. So I understand I didn't necessarily like certain things that happened or decisions that I made, but I understand how that formula has produced the person that I am right now. And I'd rather be exactly who I am now, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Mm.
A lot of times we think, oh, if I was younger, I'd do this differently or over. But in a spiritual umbrella, which is really vast and broad, you wouldn't change anything because it took that particular experience to teach you something, be it compassion or that, I'm not going to do this because I know how this feels. I wouldn't do this to another person, you know. So, um, in the long run, everything is unfolding as it should, even though it may suck sometimes and you may hate what's going on. But, there's a lesson to be learned in practically everything. And if you can get through that without reacting to the fear, because fear will try to get you to do something very differently, without being puppeted by fear, if you can get through it, you're going to evolve and spiritually and become a better person and an amazing soul to add to that.
Do you think this was always going to be happening to you? I.e., can we say that fate has this path for each of us and we're always going
Yeah,
to end up at the location where we're meant to end up? Or do we have the free will that we're meant to have?
we have free will. I just think that this was laid out on the table and says this is some of the things you could do. I have many choices I could have made in that formula that I wouldn't be here talking to you now, easily. But I'd rather be here now. I remember one time I was 17 years old
Okay.
and I was on a motorcycle and I just gotten off the freeway and I was sitting at a light and I was in a hurry too to do something. I can't remember what it was, but as soon as the light changed, I remember I was just gonna, goose my throttle and wheelie pretty much out of the spot where I was across the into the intersection. And then when I was just as the light was changing, I heard a voice say, "You better wait." And I was puzzled. I'm looking around, and just that delay of me looking around trying to figure out what that voice was, a car ran the red light and would have hit me in the intersection, and it was going fast. It probably would have killed me. So I had a choice of whether to pay attention to that voice or I could have ignored it and gone through the
Mm.
intersection, and then the result would have been based on what my earth personality, ego self made rather than the spiritual aspect of me, uh, the spiritual part made. So we have free will, and it's up to us to listen to it or to ignore it and see what the consequences are going to be.
Now, that voice, right? Did you hear it through your ears or was it in your head?
I don't think I could tell the difference. I don't. I looked because I looked around on the motorcycle as if there was somebody there. So, but it had to have been in my head because I had a helmet on,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah,
Makes
it
sense.
had to have been. So, but it did sound like it could have been somebody whispering over my shoulder right there physically. But I know it wasn't. There's no way. I was on my motorcycle by myself. There's no way.
No, that's fair.
But
But
now I was
go on.
17 then, and now I'm a lot older, and I know who that was.
Oh, okay.
And yeah.
Do you want to share or is it not?
Oh, I already shared it so many times with you. That person that called my name, the person was standing at the end of my bed, person that kept grabbing me, helping me fly different places. And then one time while I was flying, I decided I could feel this hands on my feet, on my legs, kind of helping me fly, so to speak, kind of holding me up. And this is in my book also. I looked over my shoulder and I could see this being helping me fly. And I've nicknamed the being Otto, which is like a nickname for like an oversoul kind of thing, or higher self. And I could see this being helping me fly. And after that, it happened many, many, many times. And one of the times that this being was helping me fly, I had never been there, but I went. I mean, I hadn't been there in the past, but we actually flew over. Matter of fact, it happened twice. We flew over Stonehenge on more than one occasion, and it was telling me things about Stonehenge. So when I finally did get a chance to go to England, guess where was the first place I went to?
Stonehenge,
Stonehenge.
presumably. But you've been there more times than I have.
Yeah, I've been there once in the physical and twice in the non-physical. But it was just like what I saw in the. I mean, I don't even think had seen pictures of Stonehenge, because back when I was in my 30s, I didn't care about that stuff. It wasn't on my things to do list. But I remember exactly how it happened, and when I actually went there physically, it wasn't like it was my first time. It was like, oh, I remember this. And I looked at certain things. I thought, this matches my memory of that particular dream, if you want to call it that, or experience.
Okay, that is amazing. Okay, let's quickly touch on your regression story that we were going to go on before we sum up the
Okay.
overall picture. So, regression. What was your experience there?
Okay. My friend takes me to this Dr. Carbone. I'll never forget her. And she's an awesome lady. Took me to have a past life regression experience at Dr. Carbone's house, and it was about 10 of us in this small room, and including my friend Kim. So we're sitting there, and so she starts talking us through this process, getting relaxed and all this, and guiding us or through her hypnotic um, um, technique. And as I was laying there with my eyes closed, breathing, and I thought, oh God, I hope I don't pop out. I was thinking I might have a out-of-body experience instead of have regression experience. And her guidance, I started visualizing certain things that she did. And I thought, I spent 40, $50 on this. I'm going to get everything I can out of it. I'm not going to come in and say, oh, I don't believe in this and spend that kind of money. So I thought, I spent the money. Let's go for it. So as I began to go through the regression, she said, you're walking down a forest road, and it winds left, it winds right, and eventually it opens up into a clearing. And in that clearing, you can see a house. And this house is a house that you've lived in the past. Well, okay, I'm going with the guidance, but I'm really good at visualizing stuff anyway, so it wasn't really a big deal. And I could see the house, and I could see the shutters on the house. And she said, "Now you're moving into the house and moving through the door into the house." And I moved into the door, and I could see the big wooden table there with pewter dishes on the table, and I could see staircase. No big deal. I'm moving. She said, "Move up the staircase." So I moved up in the staircase, and I started feeling like there was this room there that I was very familiar with. So I moved into the room, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm seeing furniture that looked really, really old and crudely built. And then I could see a mirror, and I wanted to step in front of the mirror to see if I could see what I look like in this
Oh yeah.
visualization. And so I stepped in front of the mirror, and there was a little blonde-headed girl staring at me in the mirror. And I'm looking at that, and I'm going, this can't be real. This has got to be way out there. I never thought of doing that, but it's got to be fake. And then she talks us through that experience and says, now you're going to experience in another life where this is the last day of that life. And I started looking around my environment where I was, and I was laying on this big bed with a bunch of pelts, like fur. And the room was like a circular room that was the framework was wooden, and there was a hole in the middle of the roof and a fire in the middle of the room where the fire was going up through the hole in the middle of the roof. And it felt Native American. And so I thought, okay, well, that's great, great memory. To make a long story short, I she talked us out of this, and I came out of that meditation, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, well, that was interesting, but I don't really believe that really happened. That was just a great imagination that I have. And so she looked over at my friend, and she said, "Do you want to share?" And my friend said, "No." She said, "Al, do you want to share?" And I said, "Well, not really, but I start touching on just little tidbits of what I just shared with you, and about the girl, the cottage, the Native American hut kind of or teepee kind of construction and that kind of thing." And while I was sharing this, my friend was looking at me like Home Alone with her mouth open, kind of thing. And I thought, oh God, I'm making a fool of myself. And I quickly stopped talking. And then she looked over at my friend Kim, the infamous Kim, and said, "Okay, you want to share your story?" And she started sharing the identical story, except from a little bit different perspective. And as she began to share, she began to touch on things that I didn't share with anybody that was in my head, because I didn't want to go into too much detail because it sounded pretty crazy to me. But as she began to share, I slowly became that person with their mouth open, looking at her thinking, oh my God, I didn't tell anybody this. And that was in that meditation that I did. She talked about her sister's room, which described it similar to the room I went into. She talked about the Native American environment that was very exactly the way I described it. She even talked about our grandmother kind of thing. And I knew there was an old lady there. I didn't know who she was exactly, but she talked about the old lady there. And I didn't mention that to anybody. So after that was all over, I'm staring at her just like she was staring at me. And now I know why she was staring at me, because I was sharing things with her that she hadn't said to anybody because she hadn't even shared yet. After that, we're walking out of the house. And this is the strange part, because this makes absolutely no sense if it didn't really happen.
Okay.
To this day, we can still talk about that experience and talk about our perspectives and things that happened to us that we didn't share with anybody that we both saw to this day. And it's been 30 years or more since then. So how could my friend have the similar experiences that I had? It wouldn't make any sense. I could sit down with another person in the room and hallucinate all day long, and they wouldn't have the same hallucination. So, and it wouldn't last for 30 years. So that was when I started exploring, trying to figure out, which it really wasn't so abnormal to me anymore at that particular point, because I was already wondering, okay, if I can live beyond my physical body, my consciousness is aware, then what happened before I became Albert? And I was already running down that path anyway. And this was just one more element that I hadn't thought about, that I started exploring and began understanding more and more aspects, or more and more about this timeless soul that we all are, that we travel through this earth life system to evolve spiritually. The thing about it is, and this is really, really cool too. When I joined the International Association of Near-Death Studies, one of the things that I've heard many, many people who've had near-death experiences talk about is the panoramic past life review. And if you've heard of that, they talk about that they get to see how they've affected people in their lives and if they've hurt them or whatever. And I thought, if there is no reincarnation, why would you have a panoramic past life review? Because it's almost like saying, you did all this stuff and really bad and you screwed up, now go to the next grade. Instead of going, well, you did all this stuff and you weren't compassionate here, so maybe you have to go back down there and work on this aspect again. And that's when I started thinking that the panoramic past life review was a hint that we reincarnate and try to get things right until we do, and then we can move on to the next level. So I read Robert Monroe shared about that, and he said what happens regarding reincarnation, because he started talking about it too, is he says we become addicted to being human. And as we become addicted to being human, we forget where we really came from. And we just continue to circle and circle having these human experiences. So none of that was I prepared for, but when Kim introduced it, it fit into my particular path, evolutionary path, spiritual path, like a glove. It fit perfectly.
Quick question about Kim then. So, was she, is she part of your soul group? Is that essentially what it is? And was she like a sister in that little girl's
I didn't know what a soul group was at the time, but yes, that's what it was.
That's what you're seeing.
That we reincarnate with certain other souls. Oh, let me share this. You just reminded me of something. As my son, he was 5 years old, and we were driving down the road, and he kept staring at me. And I looked at him. I said, "What's going on?" He said, and this really blew me away. He said, "Next time I'm going to be your dad." I thought, what? I mean, he was only 5. I hadn't shared with him anything on what I do, what I'm exploring, none of that. And when he shared that, I thought, oh my God, that added to the soul group kind of thing where we reincarnate and maybe change partners or change positions, but we're still helping each other evolve and getting to that end place, wherever that is.
Wonderful thoughts, and this whole paranormal sphere is just amazing to think about. It really is. Right, before we sum up, we're just going to go into the Koit zone. Koit zone. Right, in the Koit zone, I'm just going to ask you some random questions, and these are all Earth plane based. Okay, so you can give us little answers as you want, or as much as you want. So, steak, how do you like it served?
Medium.
Medium. Okay. Favorite sci-fi show?
The Day the Earth Stood Still with Michael Rennie.
Oh, the old film. What place would you love to visit that you haven't yet?
Machu Picchu.
Me too. I want to go there. Would you do the climb up, or would you just get the easy option?
I'm getting older now, so I'm probably going to take the donkey. Once upon a time, I would have jogged on up the hill, but I know my physical limitations of this body now.
Ah, fair play to you. Right, through the magic of a special cheese you just ate, you have the ability to swap into the body, mind of anyone through history for 24 hours. Who are you?
Robert Monroe.
It's a good answer, that, because there was a few things you said about him that I need to look into him about.
He's amazing. He was amazing.
Answers, yeah. What's the last time you were sick?
Cold? You mean common cold?
Anything.
I'd say before the pandemic, because I haven't really come in contact with too many people before then. So it had to have been 3 to 4 years ago.
No, fair play. How many pairs of shoes do you own?
I don't know, a dozen maybe.
It's quite a lot for a bloke. Fair play.
I have motorcycle boots because I ride a motorcycle too.
Oh, cool.
I have hiking boots, jogging, it's working the yard things.
The last one on this weird zone. What is your go-to drink if you have one?
Sweet tea. I don't drink alcohol or beer or anything like that, wine. So I would have to say sweet tea is something that's really thirst quenching.
Oh, fair play to you. That is the end of the Koit zone. Very quick segment. I want to get to a question that I ask everybody that I interview. And some of the people that I interview are not linked to the paranormal. And I normally ask this question, which is, what strange things have happened to you? Now, obviously, the stuff we've covered tonight, you could argue all of that is strange. So is there anything else strange that's happened to you in your life?
Yes. I was in the Air Force, and I was at Six Flags over Texas
Hmm.
having a great time. I was on leave, and I was having a great time. And right in the middle of a roller coaster, I felt sick to my stomach, like something tragic had happened, horrible, and I couldn't even enjoy the rest of the ride. And excuse me, when the ride was complete, I I immediately, my friend that was riding with me said, "What's wrong? You okay?" I said, "No, I have to call home. I have to call home." So I went to a phone booth and I dialed my mother's number, who she was back in Los Angeles, and I didn't even say hi, mom, or I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she said, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you called. Your father just died." So
Hmm.
I knew it from way from being that far away. I knew something horrible had happened. And then when I got home from Six Flags, there on the door was a note from the Red Cross saying to contact them because they were going to give me a flight to fly home for my father's funeral.
Hmm. It's that knowing again, isn't it? It just
Yeah,
comes.
that
It's
awareness, that spiritual
hmm.
awareness of not just yourself but other beings.
Yeah,
So he was part of my soul group, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's obviously connected somehow.
yeah.
Of
Can I share something with you before you sign
course you
before we
may.
sign off?
Of course.
I have a YouTube channel called the Paranormal Spin. I
Okay.
would really love it for people to check it out. It's really awesome videos. They're educational and funny. I hope I laugh at them, and people can always visit my website at alberttaylor.com and email me from my website, or you can just email me directly at Soul Traveler is SOLTRAV as in Victor LER at AOL.com, and I promise I will get back to you as soon as I can. But what's really exciting about, I just want to touch on this real quick. What's really exciting about the paranormal spin is people, we spin a wheel at the end of the show, and it dictates what the next show is going to be about. And we have some open spaces available on the wheel. And I really would appreciate people putting in the comments what they'd like to see on the show, and we'll put them into the wheel and we'll do a show on them.
And I, for one, will certainly look up your show. And I'll put all the links to everything you've mentioned in the description to this video, by the way, and point everyone
Thank
there.
you.
Um,
Appreciate it.
Before we do wrap up, I have the final question, and this may be quite a long question anyway, which is really to say, what does the phenomenon tell you about the bigger picture? I mean, what do you think it all is? If we could boil it down to its essence.
This is a big leap, but I think we're evolving to be creators, just like our father energy, our mother energy. I think we're evolving. Um, we have talents, hidden, dormant talents in our soul that we have to learn to unlock. And I believe that's what Earth life is all about, given them all the emotions and things that we encounter down here. I believe that that's the catalyst for us to evolve into higher beings, co-creators.
So we're evolving towards something amazing, essentially.
Yes, or yeah, God
Mm.
with a small G.
Yeah, it's a common answer that I'm hearing from a lot of people, and there's no smoke without fire, is there? So
Yeah,
it's got to be that. Um, there's loads more things that we could talk about, and hopefully I'll have you back in the future. We can cover all those other topics because you do robotics and all sorts of amazing things that we haven't touched on yet. But
I would be excited about that.
for the future. I'll say this to you: wonderful conversations. Thanks ever so much, Albert, for coming on. It is much appreciated.
It is my pleasure, and anytime you want me to come back, I'm available, and I would love to talk about paranormal investigation sometime
Yes.
also.
Yeah, definitely. I had that on my list, but we haven't covered it today. But if we went through everything, we could be here for like 7 hours.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you ever so much.
Okay. You take care.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye. To watch other episodes of KoitCast, or indeed animations I've made, click the image top middle. Click the image top left to download some of my songs, and click the image top right to subscribe to my channel. And make sure you tick that notification bell so you never miss an upload.